When people on YouTube talk about portrait photography, a lot of times they're talking about gear, they're talking about techniques and how to get the right lighting, how to get the right exposure. In this video, we want to talk about what's going on in front of your lens. What are the 7 things that really help you take creative portraits? Hi, my name is William Beem. I'm a portrait photographer in Central Florida, and I've been doing a lot of stuff on post-processing things, but I think it's time that we go ahead and talk about when you're actually taking your portraits, what makes a creative portrait. And there's many things that come to mind for that, but I wanted to give you a list of 7 elements of creative portraits, things that you can keep in mind when you're taking your portraits, how you direct your subjects, and things that you look for. So why don't we go ahead and get started? There are a lot of elements that can go into a creative portrait. We've taken 7 of them here. So let's go ahead and get started with the first one, expression. I see an awful lot of portraits that just don't seem to have an expression. And I love the fact that this woman is smiling the way she is, but you don't necessarily need a smile to have an expression. And one of my concerns when I'm looking at portraits is that I see a lot of blank expressions, and that's the photographer's fault, not the model or whoever the subject is. You need to give direction to your people to try and get the expression that you want out of them. So it's up to you as a creative person to go ahead and start coaching your subjects to get the expression that you want. Think about it this way. Your portrait is a story. What story do you want to tell? Put that idea inside the head of your subject and let them act it out. So in this case, we've got a subject, hard light, and she's got a very subtle expression. This is not something where I need a big cheesy grin going on. This is kind of a dark scene and she's kind of emerging from the light, but a nice subtle expression was exactly what I needed here. And same thing here. We've got a girl who looks, on a bale of hay. She's next to a barn. What do you expect from someone in this kind of situation? People are just living life. If they're having a nice, good day, that's the kind of expression that I would expect to see from somebody here. On this one, I've got a subject inside of a pool. And again, not a big cheesy grin, not a frown, not a blank expression. I asked her to look at the camera lens and just look as if she were a little bit interested. That's it. Just one suggestion. And this is the result that I got. So keep in mind that when you're looking for expression, you can work with your subject. Get them to be a bit of an actor or actress. Give them a role to play, and then let them see what they bring to the camera. The next element we want to look at is color and tone. Particularly with color, I want you to think about the color wheel, what works together. If you're not familiar with that, think about complementary colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. Think about analogous colors, which are colors that are side by side on the color wheel. And you can mix and match those two, as well as a number of other ways of mixing colors. But think about it, you might have 3 analogous colors and then 1 accent color that is on the opposite side of the color wheel from them. So think about that when you're putting together your portraits, how you're going to use color. The better job you can do with making sure the color that's showing up in your photograph works on the color wheel, the more engaging and enticing it's going to be. Now, one of the ways that you want to start working with color is making sure that you are capturing a good white balance. So in this case, you see the subject here. I kind of do this, and she's made a nice little face for me. But I do this with a gray card. I photograph the gray card, and then I can set a custom white balance inside of my camera. So right off the bat, as I'm capturing, my white balance is perfectly set from that gray card based upon the lighting that we're using for the scene. And you can see the result here. I've got good color on her because we made sure that we captured it in camera. I didn't have to do a lot of searching and work inside of post-processing with Lightroom or Photoshop. So if you can capture that in camera, you've got good color to begin with. You can use the gray card. This is Lastolite Easy Balance, I think it's called. I'll put a link to that in the description below. So basically it's a little pop-up thing. So it's easy to fit in your bag. You take it out, pop it up, ask your subject to hold it, and then you can just kind of focus. That's why it's got the little target in the center. The gray card that I showed before was just gray. You can't really focus on that because there's nothing of contrast. So for this little thing, there's something of contrast where you can actually get a focus point on it and take the photo. Another option you might want to look at is this little thing. This is an X-Rite color check passport. This works with Lightroom and probably with other tools that you can create a color profile. So this is based upon, again, the lens that you're using and the lighting conditions that you have, and you make sure that your colors are absolutely accurate. If you're working in a scenario where you have to make sure a brand color, for example, is just the right color of the brand, you need to use something like this. For example, if you were taking photos for Coca-Cola, Coke Red needs to be Coke Red. There's no sliding around, it's close to it or another. It needs to be exact. I think this is a handy little tool. It's very easy to use. You just have the subject hold it up, and then you take that, and then you can use this in your post-processing. And this is really what you're getting from color and tone. So you've got good colors, you can replicate them, but also it's a good starting place in case you want to start doing some color grading and move things around. You think about what colors go into your subject and your scene, and then they're much more easy to manipulate later if you want to. If you capture the right color using a gray card or the color checker passport, then you've got a good starting place to start moving things around. As far as the tone, look at the shadows on our face. You don't necessarily want something that's just flat. I know that's a popular style for some folks. It's not one of my favorites, but I think if you get a good tone, you have good contrast. People are attracted to contrast of different types. Highlights and shadows is one thing, but also color contrast, or even in your subject matter. If you have a subject that's kind of like a fish out of water, it doesn't belong where they are, that's a form of contrast as well. Contrast is interesting. So color and tone really does matter with your compositions. Motion is one of the things I really like to try and put in my portraits. In other words, I'm not trying to be one of the old masters having a still life subject sit there waiting while I paint. I'm fine with somebody moving around, like this young lady, swirling her dress. I like this particular thing this is a mountain biker who's coming down the path, and you get a sense of the motion that he's going through. Some of it's blurry. I'm not afraid of blur in a photograph. Matter of fact, you'll see the same thing with the dancer. How else am I going to convey motion if there is no motion blur? So the whole idea is use blur if it helps you. You don't have to use it to convey motion. For example, this is a kid diving off a wall into the water. You know that in that position, he's going to be moving along. The idea is that he's coming down, he's going to be hitting the water. You don't necessarily need motion blur to make this photograph feel a sense of motion, a sense of activity and action. You can see the other two kids there. They're ready to get their jump on as well, of a few lifeguards just running on the beach. You can see the hair moving in the wind, and it just gives you a sense that there's some movement. It's not a still life. There's a little bit more attractiveness to a portrait if there's some motion going on within it. It lets you know that people are alive. Even this last one here, it's a very simple one. A young girl's walking home from school, and it's not a grand adventure. She's just moving along. It gives you a sense of life, and this is kind of how motion works, is to say, all right, this is someone who's moving across the stage. If you're going to be using motion, I think it's a good idea to have the person or subject that's moving on one side and give them room to move through the other side of your portrait. So in this case, she's on the left side. She's got room to move and walk to the other side. If she were walking out of the scene, it wouldn't be quite as compelling, I think. Shadows are your friend. Shadows define and reveal different things. So in this case, we have a woman who's a bodybuilder, and you can see how the shadows kind of carve out her body. The same thing here. There's a little bit of sense of mystery to someone who's in shadow and just having a little bit of light come in. I think it also does a good job with the highlights. It's helping you see like the smoke coming off the cigar. You can see on the brim of his hat, he's facing a window, and you can see where the light is traveling across and then going back into shadow. But shadows are your friend. They are what's going to define your subject. Same with this one. There is just something about, I've got a combination of things going on here. I've got some movement in her hair. There was a fan, kind of blowing on her. The light is a 36-inch octabox that's kind of aimed down, and you can see how the shadows move, like from her forehead is bright, and then across her face, it moves into shadow, and it's revealing like her ear, her neck, and her chin, but most of all, her cheeks and her jawline. That's what I really wanted to accomplish here. I wanted to highlight her face and then use shadows to kind of bring out those other features. And of course, this is another man who's inside basically the same room as the first black and white gentleman who was smoking the cigar. And you can just see like there's a look in his eyes, but we drift off into shadow in the background. So I think it gives more presence and power to his expression and his eyes, the fact that they're coming out of shadow and giving you something to lock onto. In this case, you can see the same thing. If everything were lit here, like for example, there's an open door and a refrigerator inside. Nobody really cares or wants to see about that. You want to frame your subject somewhat. So one of the best ways to do that is let other places in the scene fall off into shadow. Again, this is one that's kind of high up and coming down. You can see his cheekbone is getting carved out in the shadow. Also, you can see on his body, you can see some definition there because the direction of light is falling off and giving us some shadow to show those conditions. If everything was just lit here with flat light, it'd be a boring photo completely. Connection, I think, is very important. And mostly when you're thinking about connection, first off, I tend to think about love. In this case, we're seeing a young couple, clearly that's connecting with one another. But it doesn't have to be between two people. This is a young woman who's obviously into her horse. She loves this animal. The animal also loves her. And you can see that there's just a bond between the two of them. The same thing goes here. This gentleman, that's his dog in his home, and he loves this dog. This is his pride and joy. So there's a connection that's going on there. This gentleman is a firefighter, and you can see the elements of his uniform and what he does. Take a look around his neck. He's got a stethoscope. This man's a medic as well as a firefighter, but also he's got his axe and his helmet going on. So the whole idea is he's showing you who he is and what he does based upon the possessions that he has, the connections that he has to his tools of his trade. So think about that. If you're trying to photograph somebody doing their work, well, what are the tools of their trade? And of course, once again, we kind of end where we started. There's a couple here. They're clearly in love. They're happy. And she's looking up. She adores him. That's a connection. Environment tells you a lot about the person as well. Obviously, we've got a young woman on a beach here. This goes back to someone else she's poor, but she's proud and she takes care of her things. So you can look back at her kitchen and you can see that, yeah, this is not the most expensive thing in the world, but everything is in its place. Everything is orderly. This is her environment, and she takes care of what she has. It tells you something about her by looking at the environment that she's in. You've got a young woman in braids with plaid shirt in a van. It's like, hi, I'm here to help. What can I do for you? This gives you an idea of who she is. So sometimes it could be a vehicle. It could be a home. It could be a location. Wherever a person is and how they're dressed and what the environment is like is giving you a little bit of insight as to who they are. And that, I think, makes for a bit of more of a compelling and creative portrait. This one, I like it in silhouette. You can look at the environment. This is a hard environment. It is an outdoor environment. There's a little bit of shade going on here, but you can see the wall. It's an old place. It's under harsh sunlight and conditions. These people work hard. You can even see kind of in the background, between the boxer's legs, you can see other people that are out there. They're doing their exercises. There's somebody stretching. There's somebody, doing some shadow boxing. But the idea is these guys are tough. They work out in a tough environment. It tells you something about them to look at their environment. They're not in some air-conditioned gym. They don't have the best of equipment. This is a harsh environment, but they're tough. The last thing I want to show you is talking about working. We have an innate curiosity when we see people doing something. We kind of wonder, what are they doing? So you can take a look at this guy over here. You don't even see his face, but you can kind of tell by the way he's dressed. I mean, his boots are dirty. He's got old pants on and a coat. He's got a rope and a machete. Kind of gives you an idea. He's working out in the field someplace. This is another gentleman. It's like, I walked by him and I thought, that's fascinating. There's just a rat's nest of wires in there, but he knows what he's doing and he's getting things done. And also I was really happy with kind of the way the colors worked, both his uniform, the neutral colors of the box, and also the blue and the cyan colors of the wall. So you can mix these different creative portrait elements together. So you can mix the expression, you can mix the color and the tone, you can mix the curiosity of what is somebody doing. And all those things can come together. All right, so here's another gentleman. Take a look at his environment. He's a tobacco farmer. He's got a little board on his knee, and he's rolling a cigar. But I love his face. I love the light coming in. But I want to show you also, you don't need that. This tells you everything. Some people work with their hands, and that's the story in itself. I mean, he's got his dried tobacco leaves. He's got this old knife, with tape around it over on the side so he can cut things. And that lets you know who he is and what he's doing. So there's a story to be told here based upon him doing his work. All right, so let's go over and just kind of follow up and recap. Expression is one of the core elements of creative portraits. It doesn't have to be a big cheesy grin. It doesn't have to be a blank stare. You can do anything that suits the story that you want to tell. Color and tone really matters. If you can decide what colors and what shadows and highlights and tones are going to be in your portrait before you click the shutter, then you've got a head start on everybody else. Motion really adds some liveliness to your photographs. Shadows reveal things. So you can tell if you want to define body. For example, if you've got an athlete and you really want to carve them out, shadows are a good way to do that. If you have someone with a beautiful face and you want to see their cheekbones, or you want to have their eyes really come out, shadows are your friend. Connection is very powerful. We all understand connection with other people. We also understand connection with animals and with things. If you're showing somebody who's doing work, show the things that they use as their tools of the trade. Those are their connections. Environment is another one. We see people, but we also want to see sometimes, where are they? What are they doing? What does their environment tell us about them? And finally, I like to look for people who are working. That tells us something about them. That shows us that there's a little bit of curiosity. We're nosy people. We want to know what other people are doing and what they're doing, how they're doing it, and why they're doing it. So if you can show someone who's at work, you can get some interesting portraits that way as well. Thanks so much for giving me a little bit of your time. If you found this interesting, I've got some ebooks that may be able to help you with some other aspects of your photography. So for example, if you go to williambeem.com/courses, I'll leave a link in the description below. I've got a few ebooks over here. So creative portraits that we just went through. There's more detail inside of the ebook. You can get this for free. All you have to do is go ahead and click on sign up. And then once you've registered on the site, you can come back here and you can enroll for free inside of this course. And I've also got a few other things in here as far as Lightroom classic performance hacks that'll help you maximize performance of Lightroom, visual stories so you can understand more about visual storytelling. I also have some Lightroom portrait adjustment brushes. Not only are there some adjustment brushes that go into Lightroom, but there's a small mini course that goes along with you that shows how to use them. So they're all available. They're all free. Just go to williambeem.com/courses and hit the blue sign up button and you can get inside. If you enjoyed this, please share it with a friend. I would love it if you would go ahead and like this video. Tell YouTube that we're doing something right. And of course, please subscribe and go ahead and click the bell notification icon so you'll be notified the next time I put out a video. Thank you so much. We'll see you again in the next video.